This is where they die! All my life, I wanted to tell this story because it's the best story I've ever encountered. And eventually, I gained the skills as a cartoonist to be, I thought I could finally handle it. And I didn't want to be one of those people sitting in a bar somewhere talking about the story he'd never get around to doing. So I read a great deal about it, and I went to Greece and sailed on the Aegean and saw the terrain. And I went to all the different battlefields, including the hot gates. And I was finally ready.
I had read the graphic novel, and I thought it'd be awesome to make it into a movie.
Zach knew the graphic novel, so it was like love at first sight.
My initial reaction when they approached me was to say no repeatedly, because I really didn't want my work adapted to movies.
You know, Frank is the most highly regarded graphic novelist in America.
When they explained the story and then showed me the comic book, and immediately just see these guys marching and you think, oh, wow.
You know, I just think Zach's got a real kind of vision on it all. And you can see it when he's making it. He knows exactly what he wants. He's like, yeah, we got it. Or, you know, you're really directed down a certain road, which is brilliant.
Zach was so confident in his ability to see what Frank's book was and how to put that on film. He wanted to make Frank's version and was very determined to make the book.
Zach really wanted to make this movie, and he and Johnny and Mark, and no doubt many others, were just dedicated to it. And I met Zach, and he's kind of irresistible. He's really charming, and he was completely focused on this project. It was very difficult to say no, so I didn't.
Now we have a script, we have a book. The book represents some sort of visual roadmap. The script represents a cinematic roadmap. How do you squish those two together and make a movie out of it?
I think I might want to go a little higher on the platform. A wee bit higher, but...
One more box for the platform. When we made 300, we had to adhere to a strict set of rules for the production of the movie when we said we're going to make it look like a graphic novel.
If we're going to do a film based on a graphic novel, we need to colorize things in a particular graphic way. Otherwise, it basically becomes a contemporary historical epic, which wasn't Zach's intention, you know, and he said that straight up.
Basically, what we did was we said, okay, when you look at Frank's drawings, a camera doesn't take a picture like that. And so every piece of it needs to be manufactured and revisualized because you can't film anything that's real.
Almost all of the film is shot against a green screen, so it's up to the visual effects department and the visual effects art department to create all the backgrounds from scratch using images in the style of the comic book.
The hard part was that usually in a movie you're trying to figure out what the look is going to be, or you're trying to get into the vision of the director or the project. Frank Miller, you know, in his book, it was so clear what the look was, and Zach was going off of that. So it was kind of like that work was done for me. So in a way that was easy, but how do you interpret, you know, a book into 3 dimensions? Or how do you make print come alive in film?
It was a cool process because we'd sit at a table and I would describe the scene. And then I had Jim Bissell, who was the production designer, and Jim comes with a giant amount of experience. And, you know, he was the voice of reason, I always feel like.
We pre-designed everything and did a series of conceptual drawings of the kind of environments that the action took place in. And then we created a series of almost sculptural abstract terrains where all the action could take place, and then we could lay these backgrounds in. We looked at it, we processed it, we talked about how far all of these surfaces needed to be away from blue screens, we looked at budget numbers, we came up with a lot of different speculative designs and then finally settled on this design.
Just because it was a visual effects movie, we still had to design every single background and set. So if it wasn't being built practically, it was going to be built in the computer. We still thought about how that was going to be built and what it was going to look like.
That was really interesting is to have the CGI next to it and where do we stop construction? What's the best place to stop building and for them to start building?
These days, you know, somebody like Jim Bissell and a lot of production designers actually create their sets in 3D, much like a visual effects artist would. And he'll actually literally draw what his set looks like in 3D and then go and put a virtual camera in that set and be able to previs.
What kind of space can we have for the actors to move through that we can light and then marry to the backgrounds that we later lay in with the computer? So what we've done is we've actually sculpted a model of what we think the battle area is and what the hot gates look like right here. And we photographed it from some of our primary angles. And Meinard is putting a painting, he's laying in the rest of the geography here.
A small percentage of the time you won't actually have to do any visual effects work at all because you've actually got the entire set there. You know, it's about minimising workload in post-production by doing a little bit more work in pre-production.
One of the things that I think is really overlooked, but I think really evident in 300 is that when you blow out a highlight, if you did that in a real photograph, the sky would be white. And that's not what happens in 300. The highlights are blown out, but the sky still has detail. And in some ways, even though it sounds super simple, it's incredibly sort of different from the way you see.
So lighting in this movie is trying to do two things. It's trying to simulate the look of the comic book and give us a nice, even base of lighting from which we can do the crush.
One of the devices that we use to create that high contrast look is called crushing, where we take all the digital information in the film at the low end, which is towards the blacks, and all the digital information at the high end, which is towards the whites, and we compress it so that there's a lot less information, but there are a lot more black portions of the image and a lot more white portions. What eventually winds up happening is the contrast lines, where the blacks feather into the mid-range, are very smooth and very much like Frank's drawings. It also takes the colors in the mid-range and makes them blossom so that it has a very painterly effect. It looks a little bit like some of the watercolor washes that Frank uses.
Looking at what Frank Miller had done for the graphic novel, I thought it'd be interesting to actually kind of try and mimic that. One of the things I've been doing is using coffee stain skies, which is, you know, literally balsamic vinegar or watercolor or whatever, coffee stains, and getting a nice texture on a piece of paper and then scanning that texture in, and then actually mixing those watercolor textures into a photographic sky.
What's going to end up being the look of the movie is that there's no difference between what's real and what's virtual.
It was very important to streamline the appearance of the characters, to make them more dynamic, and to lose the sense of this being an old story. It's not an old story, it's an eternal story.
We never say that, oh, this is the Time Machine movie.
The point of view that we have is the one person who lived. And by going through his eyes, it enables us to make the story into a legend.
It's been more than 30 years since the wolf and the winter cold.
Well, Delios is known as the storyteller in Frank Miller's comic book. He spends a lot of the time entertaining the troops when there's downtime.
He's talking to a group of soldiers who are going to go and sacrifice their lives. And so to inspire them, you know, the story becomes bigger.
You know, the storyteller knows how to not ruin a good story with the truth necessarily. He knows how to exaggerate a moment for dramatic purposes. Not to mention the Greek tradition of sitting around this campfire making up a story. That's not an outrageous leap.
Now, as then, a beast approaches.
The story was a myth before it was history. It's like you would tell someone the story of 300 if you were an ancient Greek, and you could make up any bit you wanted, really.
I came up with the story of the wolf to establish Leonidas as a legendary hero, rather than just what was probably a much more practical man.
You know, those archetypes are what makes 300, you know, resonate.
Working with Zach, he really wanted it to be a monstrous piece of work. So that's what we're going for here. This is a neck mechanism and the leg armature for the wolf. This is a combination of a pallet for a polar bear and an extra large wolf. This is to show you just something what it takes to create eyeballs for an animatronic beast. All these pieces are handmade here in the shop. And it's really time consuming, but it's great.
It's like wrestling with Marlon.
Turn over.
We built the mechanical wolf as a reference mostly for the CG artists to draw from. When I saw how good it was, I thought maybe we'd get more shots from it. I didn't think it would be as cool as it was.
Whack some contrast on it.
But in the end, you need everything to sort of live in the same world, and that's why every shot of the wolf now is a CG shot, because you just need them all to be the same guy.
The Hunchback is a unique and a wonderful piece that we look forward to make from the very beginning. Ever since we saw the comic book and saw this wonderful character that Frank Miller had developed, we wanted to do that piece.
I turned Ephialtes into a hunchback because I wanted him to be a pathetic figure.
Ephialtes is part of, again, of the legend and of the drama of the story.
Zach did an amazing job of exaggerating once again in a theatrical, graphic, artistic way that this was the traitor.
The Hunchback was a very difficult makeup because we had 3 elements that we had to adapt to try to come up with a final character. The size of the actor, elements from the maquette, and elements from the comic book.
The actor, Andrew Teneman, brings to life all that makeup.
His eye on the suit doesn't move, so we do a little bit of animation on his eye because it's essentially, you know, an actor inside of a very thin rubber appliance, and the eye is so huge, there's no way he can actually move that eye. And there's no room for any mechanisms in there, so we're doing that eye alteration digitally.
Yeah, this is a mechanical hand, so we had to put this on separate.
Oh, what's that hand do?
We do have a blender that goes here, and plus the...
Jesus. Does it move? How do you operate it?
That's his real thing.
Oh, sorry. Not that one. That's Leonidas. Sorry, Stevie. That's cool.
Welcome, Leonidas. We have been expecting you.
The Ephors represented moral decay, and they represented selling out and being corrupt, and therefore, you know, the makeups kind of represented that as far as they were falling apart and oozing and disturbing, and that was sort of to be repulsive, to reflect the inner self.
The Ephors choose only the most beautiful Spartan girls to live among them as oracles.
Originally, when we started talking about the Oracle and how to do it, I showed everyone my drawings because I had the 2 Frank frames. I think I had like another 6 frames that I had drawn, which were kind of in the same world, you know, like her looking sexy and her hair flying up in the air. So we said, yeah, let's put her on a wire. Let's, you know, blow wind on her. We even did choreography, dry choreography, to see like what that would be. But I think pretty early on, I think it was Chris Watts who said, what if we put her underwater? And I said, you know, that could work.
It's a 0G effect that we've recreated into a tank that we've built. So we made a giant tank for the girl to perform.
It turned out to be really quite a cool little effect. We had the executioners, I knew they were in the graphic novel. You know, Xerxes is displeased with his generals, he disciplines them. That's in the graphic novel. Big axe, which is cool. I thought, wow, you know, how hilarious and horrific at the same time to have like a guy with giant blades for arms chopping their heads off.
When we go to design a character for 300, we want to just approach it from all different avenues. One, we want to approach it if we could do it as a prosthetic makeup. But if that didn't work, we also wanted to approach it as a straight makeup. So we went to high fashion, to different sorts of sculpture books for anatomy, to change the human anatomy, to you know, different comic books.
I think that you could go wham like you. Yeah.
Eyes as dark as night, teeth filed to fangs, soulless. The Immortals.
The Immortals, which are the Persian elite warriors, will be wearing these masks. You won't see their faces, except for maybe a few reveals.
Production-wise, what we're doing, we're just doing multiple molds of all of the different masks. We've sculpted 2 different ones, so we're doing like 3 to 4 molds of each mask. Just to make it quicker, we have to pour about 40 or 50 masks, I believe.
The Wall of the Dead that Chris Bridges worked on so meticulously, it'll appear to be hundreds of bodies. We have 60 silicone bodies, about 100 fiberglass pieces to create this Wall of the Dead.
If you look at Frank's drawing, it's almost like the bodies are like cresting like a wave, like washing down on him. Chris came up with this idea of shooting the same drop with 3 cameras to allow us to get all 3 plates at once. And also to have the foreground, the midground, and the background all in one take.
The Giant was really one of my favorite characters, just because he went through a complete evolution of like this. We were going to cast a big bodybuilder, but we couldn't find anybody of that sort of stature. And the design, we did several designs based upon a bodybuilder. When they finally cast Robert's 7'1". He's a wrestler, but his body wasn't built like a bodybuilder. He was built more like an old-time boxer. So when I saw him and we all looked at him, and I didn't feel the design really worked with him. And we talked to Zach and Debbie about possibly changing the look of this character, like really a week and a half before we had to shoot him. I said, let's, why don't we make him more like he's, like an abused dog, kind of beaten up and like an old-time boxer, and they loved it. And Zach said, yeah, sure. And so we had CJ sculpt it, and he put this whole thing together like in a week and a half with the guys here on set, and I thought it turned out amazing.
Spartans! What is your profession?
The movie's a physical movie, I think, because of the green screen and because of the virtual environments being not real. To me, like the aspect of being truly physical was the thing that maybe would bring a truth to the fighting or to like the physicality of the Spartans.
We had to basically create men that you would believe would be these warriors.
And if you look at Frank's book, the Spartans, they are physical.
They picked up on the stylization I brought to the drawing of it. So these Spartans are much more physical in their appearance than the real Spartans were.
Their body is their tool, it's their weapon, it's their machine, it's what they use to survive.
And that's really where Mark came in.
A friend of mine is this guy, Mark Dwight. I knew that he had started to train people, and I thought, Mark's the guy. He's the right guy to train Spartans.
I'm interested in training guys that lay their fitness on the line. I mean, I come from a background of training people who are special operations personnel in the military. They're guys who fight in cages. They're professional mountain climbers. They're firefighters, paramedics, people who are using their fitness for a particular job.
I was frightened in the beginning. I went on his website just to see what kind of training that would be involved, and I looked at it and I just thought, I can't do that. I just cannot do that.
It's about where you end up after the 20 minutes. You go somewhere. He wanted to send the actors together to that place.
What we do, and we train people in groups, it turns out to sort of forge guys and girls into a really solid team. The reason that this sort of result can occur is because the workouts are so difficult, in the sense that the person being trained or the person doing the training, it passes through some kind of crucible at some point during the workout. Really what we wanted to do with the actors was make them a gang, make them into a group of guys that had been through, that had shared hardship together for a significant period of time. It wasn't just a week, it was week after week after week. And finally, I think they've come out the other side as a fighting force that will be believable on the screen.
They did bond together. They did when they all stand shield to shield, shoulder to shoulder. I feel like I didn't have to do that work of going, okay, now in this scene, in this fake scene, in this fake moment, you care about the guy next to you, you've struggled with him, blah, 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 blah. That was just behind their eyes and real.
This is where we hold them! This is where we fight!
The way we made it, the way it was always built from history, Leonidas is the perfect legendary king.
He exists and lives and breathes and fights with his men. It's the opposite of Xerxes, who sits up in his high tower, who has slaves, who bribes, who seduces. It's a great line in the movie when Xerxes says, "How can you ever stand against me when I would gladly kill any one of my men for victory?" And I say, "And I would die for any one of mine." And that, to me, is the essence of Leonidas.
There's a shocking scene where Leonidas shoves the messengers into the well. It was a great way to reveal that the Spartans broke rules constantly, which they did. It was blasphemy to kill a messenger, and to kill 30 of them was beyond blasphemy. But those were the Spartans.
This is Sparta!
What I love about Leonidas is he is probably the most decisive character I've ever played. But in his one moment of indecision, he needs backup. He needs a second opinion. He needs assurance. He looks to his wife.
One of the mysteries of Sparta is that women had a remarkably powerful position in society.
She knows the Spartan code, you know, and it's freedom, and you fight, and you hold on to that belief.
Queen Gorgo was a formidable politician. Spartan women were trained to battle just like the men.
Gorgo was one character that there weren't many visual cues for. In the book, she's drawn in a quite an angular and very Amazonian kind of way, and we wanted to soften that a little bit and make her a much more three-dimensional sort of character that had like lots of different qualities and complexities to her.
The thing about Gorgo is that we wanted to create more screen time for her and something for her to be doing, so it isn't this constant like just battle after battle after battle.
She's left to kind of deal with everything back in Sparta, so she goes through a bit of a journey herself.
We realized that Gorgo was as much a warrior as the king was, and that she needed to be fighting with as much resolve for her Sparta and for her son, who is the future king, as Leonidas was at the Hot Gates.
It's very handy to have a director that understands action from a performer's point of view.
His physicality it's priceless. It's really been a blessing as far as being able to get this film in the schedule we've been allotted.
We kind of had a look we want to do, how we want to do the two-man, kind of watching each other's back and how Spartans fight as a unit together.
You still here? Somebody's gotta watch your back. Oh, no, I'm a little busy.
They did that better than 90% of the stuntmen in the business. That's how good they got at that. What we did was do that this is the graphic novel version and not the History Channel. There's some leeway there to make them a little more exciting.
This is Leonidas' freelance, or the Crazy Horse shot. Basically, 3 cameras running at the same time, as close as possible to each other. And then in post, we ramped the speed and we zoom in and out between the 3 cameras. That's how you get this single take, wide, medium, tight, without cutting, because it actually physically is the same take. So all the action matches.
Like this, I haven't really heard a score that would be aggressive enough and as unapologetic as this needs to be at times to support the action in this film, to support the characters and the look. And the way I approach a lot of this is I like to really feel the film, feel the texture of the scene, and obviously understand the energy that Zach wants the music to provide for a given scene. You know, we're trying things, we're trying to do something that hasn't been done this way before. You know, everything's been done in one way or another, but we're trying to do something with the music, with the movie, with everything, in a way that hasn't quite been done before.
I wanted the audience to feel, in some ways, like they knew where they were, you know, as far as like what this world was, but in other ways, completely something else.
This is the weirdest movie I've ever seen.
That's good, that'll work out.
Xerxes 10 is a freak show in itself.
Really, our purpose is to bring this to life.
And we tried to understand what he was looking for, interpolated it into designs, and brought it back and he goes, yeah, just like that, except I wish I could just do this more and this more.
The actors have to wear costumes that are kind of outrageous.
You know, it's a freak show. There's transvestites and midgets and giants. We have women with 3 nipples. We have women with piercings all over their bodies. We have all kinds of freaky makeups going on.
Xerxes' tent is all flowing fabrics and soft edges. It's this phantasmagoric kind of environment.
Let me guess. You must be Xerxes.
Come, Leonidas. Let us reason together.
From the beginning, I was like, look, I want Xerxes to be way taller, like crazy scale. That was part of the aesthetic, you know, of the storyteller, sort of linking in with the impossible image that you see. Because everyone's around the campfire and they're a little bit like, and? Okay, he's king of the Persian army, so what? Yeah, but he's all in gold and he's bald and he's 9 feet tall. Now, okay, all right, good. What else? You know, it's like, now the story sounds a little more interesting.
It's not the lash they fear. It is my divine power.
Xerxes has convinced himself he's a god. He's like a spoiled kid. He's rich, he's arrogant, but underneath he's ultimately weak and very insecure. So I think he has a bit of an ego problem. That's what I think.
Steve, Frank!
Kill him! At the end, when he bleeds, I think he's forced to face his humanity and welcome to reality, you know? Dream is over.
When I read that sequence of the graphic novel where Xerxes gets clipped in the cheek and bleeds, and it sort of is his downfall, that moment, I think you think in the Hollywood version, Leonidas kills Xerxes with that shot. The idea that he cuts him and he bleeds, and that is enough. That's a kind of a subtle game to play. Being able to just take his own personality and turn it on himself. Whether or not those events happened as they happened, when you are going to battle in ancient Greece and someone tells you the story of the Battle of Thermopylae, and that's the thing that makes you join with your brother, then it is true. Then the sacrifice that the Spartans made did work.
But from free Greek to free Greek, the word was spread that bold Leonidas and his 300, so far from home, laid down their lives.
It wasn't the time where you could Google someone or YouTube or whatever. It was a time where storytellers had to tell what things look like. Hence, the elephants, the monsters, everything is heightened reality.
Let's face it, none of us know the way that it was. We're giving you our interpretation of the way that it was. And, you know, the way that we think it is very heroic and very brave. And, you know, I think that makes for great stories.
This was a movie based on a brilliant graphic novel created by someone who did a tremendous amount of homework, but still interpreted it in a way that satisfied his sense, Frank's sense of history. Then Zach took that and polished it his way. And so it's fanciful. It's mythology.
Something that happens when you see the story actually play out and you see the emotions expressed. You know whether it works or not. That's what making a movie is about. You sit and you watch it and you go like, you know what? That's what I wanted it to be. Can't really ask for anything else. If no one saw the movie or if everyone sees the movie, that's great. But for you and on that day, sitting in the room watching it, and you go, you know what? That's as best as I could hope for. That's satisfying, and that's what it's all about, really.
Give thanks, man! To Leonidas and the brave 300! To victory!
I'm ready for the next charge.
One more.
I won't be having apples for lunch, but I'm okay for the scene.
Okay, one more. Come on, one more.
Hi there, here's today's Daily Fact. Did you know that the deadliest actors with the all-time most kills in movies are Mila Jovovich, around 1,300, and Jet Li, over 1,000, with Schwarzenegger, Stallone and Statham way down the list with a count of a mere 700-800. Remember to click below to subscribe or on the side for more great content.